Episode 7 of Landman opens with a quiet kind of tension. The kind that doesn't announce itself with chaos but lets you feel that something is off. Before anyone says a word, Tommy Norris is still standing, still showing up, still pretending. He has control, but at this point, it's obvious that control is an illusion. This episode makes one thing very clear right from the start. The walls are closing in. And Tommy knows it, even if he refuses to admit it out loud. The pressure from the offshore deal, the constant presence of Galliano circling like a shark, and the emotional weight of living with TL are all starting to blur together. Tommy isn't just managing oil anymore, he's managing regret, fear, and the slow realization that he may already be too deep to climb out clean. The episode leans heavily into atmosphere. Conversations feel heavier, silences last longer, every look between characters carries meaning. Tommy's scenes, in particular, are filled with exhaustion. Not the kind you fix with sleep, but the kind that comes from carrying responsibility you never actually asked for. He's still playing the role of the guy who keeps everything running. But episode 7 starts questioning whether that role is sustainable at all. There's a growing sense that Tommy isn't steering the ship anymore, he's just reacting to waves created by other people's decisions. Rebecca's storyline continues to move into dangerous territory, and this is where the episode really starts to feel like a slow burn disaster. She's operating under the belief that intelligence and confidence are enough to save the company. But this episode subtly shows how confidence can turn into isolation. She's making calls, giving orders, and positioning herself as the smartest person in the room, yet she's missing something crucial: trust. Not from others, but in her own judgment. The episode doesn't frame her as careless, but it does frame her as someone who might be overestimating her control over forces that are much bigger than her. Galliano, on the other hand, doesn't need much screen time to make his presence felt, even when he's not physically there. His influence is everywhere. Every negotiation, every delay, every reasonable compromise seems to bend the situation further in his favor. Episode 7 quietly reinforces the idea that Galliano doesn't rush, he waits. He lets other people make mistakes and then profits from them, and the scariest part is that he never has to raise his voice to do it. You get the sense that he already knows how this ends and everyone else is just catching up. Meanwhile, TL continues to act as both a mirror and a warning for Tommy. Their relationship in this episode is less explosive than before, but somehow more unsettling. TL doesn't need to yell anymore, his words land because they carry experience, bitterness, and the weight of choices that can't be undone. Every interaction between them feels like Tommy is staring at a future version of himself that he desperately wants to avoid but doesn't know how to escape. TL isn't just living in Tommy's house, he's living in his head. Angela, as always, exists in her own lane, and episode 7 doubles down on her unapologetic worldview. She's confident, comfortable, and completely unbothered by the chaos around her, while everyone else is calculating losses and consequences. Angela is focused on living well, looking good, and staying emotionally untouchable. The episode doesn't judge her outright, but it does highlight the contrast between her freedom and Tommy's burden. She moves through life like consequences are optional, while Tommy absorbs them for everyone else. By the end of the first act of this episode, one theme becomes impossible to ignore: denial. Almost every major character is avoiding a truth they don't want to face. Tommy is denying how close he is to collapse. Rebecca is denying how fragile her position really is. Galliano is denying nothing at all, which is exactly why he's winning. Episode 7 doesn't rush to answers. Instead, it sets the board carefully, letting us know that the next moves won't be about fixing problems but about surviving them. And judging by how this episode begins, not everyone is going to survive with their pride, their job, or their identity intact. Episode 7 really starts to dig into the consequences of decisions that were made long before this moment, and nowhere is that more obvious than in the way the offshore deal continues to unravel. What makes this episode interesting is that nothing technically blows up yet, but you can feel the fuse burning shorter with every scene. Meetings feel less like negotiations and more like quiet power plays. Every sentence has weight. Every pause feels intentional. This is no longer about making money. It's about who ends up holding the blame when things finally go wrong. Tommy spends most of this episode reacting instead of leading, and that's a huge shift for his character. He's used to being the guy who walks into a room and stabilizes it. Here, he walks into rooms where decisions have already been made without him. You can see it on his face. He's listening more than talking, calculating instead of commanding. And that's dangerous for someone like Tommy because his identity is built around being needed. Episode 7 subtly asks a brutal question: what happens when Tommy realizes the machine doesn't actually need him anymore? Rebecca's arc becomes more isolating as the episode progresses. She's still sharp, still confident, still moving like she believes logic will save her. But the cracks are starting to show. People around her aren't pushing back openly. Yet you can feel the distance growing. She's becoming the person decisions get pinned on, whether that's fair or not. And the scary part is that she doesn't see it happening. She believes she's stepping up, when in reality she may be stepping into a trap that's already been laid out. This episode also makes it very clear that Galliano is playing an entirely different game. While others are focused on survival, he's focused on positioning. He doesn't overextend. He doesn't rush. He lets urgency work against everyone else. Every time his name comes up, the tone shifts. It's not fear exactly, but resignation. Like everyone already knows that if things collapse, he'll somehow walk away cleaner than the rest. Galliano isn't threatening anyone. He doesn't have to. His power comes from patience. And episode 7 leans hard into that reality. The family dynamics continue to bleed into the business side of the story, especially through TL. His presence feels heavier here, almost suffocating. He's not actively trying to control Tommy, but his worldview does it for him. TL speaks in lived experience, in scars instead of theories. And while some of what he says sounds like wisdom, there's also bitterness woven into it. The episode makes you wonder whether TL is actually warning Tommy or slowly pulling him toward the same fate. Their conversations aren't loud, but they linger, leaving Tommy visibly unsettled long after they end. Angela, meanwhile, remains completely unfazed by the storm building around her. What's fascinating in episode 7 is how deliberate her detachment feels. She's not ignorant of the tension, she simply refuses to carry it. While Tommy is consumed by pressure, Angela chooses comfort, confidence, and indulgence without apology. The contrast is almost cruel. It forces you to ask whether Angela is selfish or simply smarter about protecting her peace. Either way, her freedom exists because someone else is paying the emotional bill, and that someone is Tommy. As the episode moves forward, a pattern starts to emerge. Every character is being quietly positioned for what comes next. No speeches, no dramatic confrontations, just small shifts in loyalty, responsibility, and perception. Episode 7 doesn't try to shock you. Instead, it unsettles you. It shows how disasters are rarely sudden. They're built slowly through silence, ego, and misplaced confidence. By the end of this section of the episode, it's clear that Landman isn't just telling a story about oil, money, or corporate politics anymore. It's telling a story about erosion of trust, of identity, of control. And the scariest part is that no one seems to know exactly when the ground beneath them started giving way. Episode 7 also spends a surprising amount of time exploring how personal relationships quietly influence professional outcomes, even when no one wants to admit it. This is where Landman continues to shine, because it understands that power doesn't just move through boardrooms, it moves through kitchens, bedrooms, car rides, and uncomfortable conversations that never make it into official reports. Tommy is living proof of that. Every personal complication in his life is bleeding directly into his ability to make clear decisions. And this episode makes it painfully obvious that he's starting to feel trapped by his own obligations. Tommy's biggest struggle here isn't Galliano or the offshore deal. It's the growing sense that everyone around him expects him to absorb impact without complaint. He's the buffer, the fixer, the guy who takes hits so others don't have to. Episode 7 shows how exhausting that role really is. You see it in the way he listens without interrupting, nods without agreeing, and carries on conversations that he clearly doesn't have the energy for anymore. The scary part is that no one notices his burnout, or maybe they do and just assume he'll handle it like he always has. Rebecca's situation becomes more uncomfortable as the episode progresses. She's starting to realize that being indispensable is not the same as being protected. The higher she climbs, the fewer allies she has. Episode 7 does a good job of showing how isolation creeps in quietly. No one openly turns against her, but no one steps in to share the burden either. She's surrounded by people, yet completely alone in her decision-making. And when you're alone, mistakes don't just hurt you, they become defining. There's also a subtle shift in how others speak to Rebecca. The tone changes. Conversations become shorter, more formal, more cautious. It's the kind of shift that signals preparation, not for success, but for blame, and whether Rebecca sees it or not. The episode makes it clear that she's being positioned as the face of decisions that could soon become liabilities. That's not ambition anymore. That's exposure. Galliano continues to operate with unsettling calm. What makes him dangerous in episode 7 isn't what he says, but what he doesn't. He rarely explains himself. He doesn't justify his intentions. He allows others to project their hopes and fears onto him, knowing full well that desperation fills in the blanks. His confidence isn't loud or flashy, it's quiet and patient. which somehow makes it more threatening. You get the feeling that while everyone else is stressed about timelines, Galliano is already planning the aftermath. The episode also deepens the generational tension between Tommy and TL. Their interactions in episode 7 feel heavier, almost philosophical. TL isn't just commenting on Tommy's life choices anymore. He's challenging the way Tommy defines success, responsibility, and masculinity. TL believes survival is a victory in itself. Tommy, on the other hand, still wants meaning, respect, and control. That difference in worldview creates friction that no amount of mutual love can smooth over. It's not about right or wrong, it's about incompatible truths. Angela continues to function as emotional contrast rather than emotional support. Episode 7 reinforces the idea that she thrives in chaos because she refuses to internalize it. While others carry guilt, stress, and accountability, Angela moves freely. Untouched by consequences, she's not cruel, she's just honest about her priorities, comfort, confidence, self-preservation, and in a world where everyone else is slowly breaking under pressure, that kind of honesty almost looks like strength. What episode 7 does exceptionally well is show how momentum works against people. Once a narrative starts forming around you, it becomes difficult to escape it. Tommy is becoming the man who handles things, even when things are unhandleable. Rebecca is becoming the decision-maker who can be blamed. Galliano is becoming the solution that arrives after the damage is done. These roles aren't officially assigned, but they're solidifying all the same. By the time this part of the episode wraps up, there's an overwhelming sense that everyone is walking toward something irreversible. No one has crossed the line yet, but they're close enough to feel the heat. Episode 7 doesn't rush to the fall. It wants you to understand how the fall happens slowly, quietly, and with just enough warning to make it hurt even more when it finally comes. Episode 7 starts pressing harder on the emotional cracks that have been forming all season, especially when it comes to Tommy. He is no longer just reacting to problems as they come, now he is actively questioning himself. And that shift changes everything. Tommy has always survived by being certain, by believing that if he just works harder and stays loyal, things will eventually stabilize. This episode challenges that belief without ever directly confronting it. Instead, it puts him in situations where every option leads to loss. Whatever choice he makes, something important is going to break. Tommy's identity continues to slip away in quiet, uncomfortable ways. He has built his entire life around being dependable, being the man who absorbs pressure so others do not have to. In this episode, that role starts to feel more like a trap than a strength. The more responsibility he carries, the less room he has to protect himself. He is loyal to the company, loyal to the people around him, and loyal to a version of himself that may no longer exist. Episode 7 makes it clear that this loyalty is slowly costing him everything else. Rebecca reaches a turning point here as well. For the first time, her confidence no longer feels unshakable. She is still sharp and capable, but the weight of her position is starting to show. Decisions that once felt logical now feel dangerous. Conversations that once felt collaborative now feel like quiet interrogations. She is beginning to understand that when things fall apart, the blame will not be spread evenly. It will land on the person whose name is attached to the final call, and more, that person is her. Galliano's presence grows stronger without him needing to do much at all. He does not push, he does not threaten, and he does not rush. He simply waits while others wear themselves down. People begin adjusting their language around him, choosing their words carefully, anticipating his reactions before he even speaks. That is real power. Episode 7 shows that Galliano is not fighting for control, he already has it. He is just letting the situation ripen until everyone else has no choice but to accept his terms. The tension between Tommy and TL takes on a deeper, more reflective tone in this episode. TL is no longer just criticizing or provoking, he is exposing regret. His words carry the weight of a man who has already lived the life Tommy is heading toward. That realization hangs heavy between them. Tommy hears the warning, but he also resents it, because it feels like a future he is being pushed toward rather than one he chose. Their conversations are calm on the surface, but emotionally, they are some of the most intense moments of the episode. Angela continues to exist outside the pressure that is crushing everyone else. She is confident, comfortable, and completely unapologetic about it. This episode subtly reframes her role. She is not just a source of chaos or indulgence. She represents a life without responsibility, a life where survival is not tied to sacrifice. Whether that makes her admirable or unbearable depends on how you see it. What is clear is that her freedom stands in sharp contrast to Tommy's growing confinement. Silence plays a major role in this episode. Some of the most important moments happen without dialogue, a look that lasts too long, a decision that is delayed, a conversation that ends before the truth is spoken. Episode 7 understands that tension does not always come from confrontation. Sometimes it comes from avoidance. And nearly everyone here is avoiding something they are not ready to face. By this point in the episode, it is impossible to ignore that the situation is heading toward collapse. No one has officially crossed the line yet, but they are standing close enough to feel the heat. The choices being made now are not about winning anymore. They are about who will be left standing when everything finally comes apart. Episode 7 closes with a heavy sense of inevitability, the kind that lingers long after the screen fades to black. Nothing explodes, no dramatic twist flips the story upside down. But the damage is already in motion. This episode isn't about shock, it's about realization. Everyone, especially Tommy, is starting to understand that the system they trusted is not designed to protect them, it is designed to survive. Even if it means sacrificing the people holding it together. Tommy ends this episode more isolated than ever. He is still surrounded by people, still involved in every major decision. But emotionally, he is alone. The man who once believed loyalty was his greatest strength is now facing the possibility that loyalty might be the very thing that destroys him. There is a quiet sadness in the way he carries himself near the end, like someone who knows what's coming but hasn't figured out how to stop it. His fear is no longer about losing his job. It is about losing himself. Rebecca's position feels more fragile than it ever has. She is standing at the edge of a decision that could define her entire career, and the pressure is crushing. The episode makes it clear that if things go wrong, she will not be protected by titles, intelligence, or good intentions. She will be blamed. And what makes it worse is that she is starting to see that reality herself. Confidence can only take you so far when the people above you are already preparing an exit plan that does not include you. Galliano, meanwhile, appears almost untouched by the chaos. He moves through the episode with calm certainty, as if he already knows how this story ends. While others scramble to manage risk, he positions himself to benefit from failure. Episode 7 reinforces the idea that Galliano doesn't need to create destruction, he simply knows how to take advantage of it. And that makes him the most dangerous person in the room. The personal stories continue to mirror the professional collapse. TL's presence remains a constant reminder of what happens when life becomes something you endure, instead of something you shape. His words, his regrets, and his warnings hang over Tommy like a shadow. At the same time, Angela continues to thrive, untouched by the consequences that are crushing everyone else. Her confidence is unshaken, her comfort uninterrupted. She represents a life without accountability. And the show forces you to confront whether that kind of life is freedom or denial. What episode 7 does so well is leave you with discomfort. Instead of closure, it doesn't tie up loose ends, it tightens. Then every storyline feels poised on the edge of a breaking point. Trust is thinning. Alliances are shifting, and the cost of past decisions is finally coming due. By the time the episode ends, one thing is clear. The real fallout hasn't happened yet. Episode 7 is the calm before the storm. The moment where everyone senses disaster but still believes they have time to fix it. And if this season has taught us anything, it's that time is the one thing none of them actually have.